Brett Devine, General Manager Communications for the ATC. We're about to introduce our first guests for Behind the Barriers. We've got an interesting race meeting this week. Gosford coming to Sydney.
Yeah, that's right, Tim. Royal Randwick is the scene, but it's for the Gosford Gold Cup and the Takeover Target Stakes. And again, we're thrilled to be joining with the Gosford Race Club to keep racing going and to be able to give all of our members more racing, good class racing on Saturday. It'll be another strong meeting.
Well, before we officially go behind the barriers, I want you to do the introduction because he's a guy we both like a lot, a legend of the industry.
Yeah, well, as someone who's worked in media a long time myself, Ken Callander, not only a real big figure in Australian media, but also, of course, he is racing himself and a long career, has such great knowledge, such great passion for racing, and I'm sure he'll share some of that with everybody today. And he still comes to the races even though he's not working, so it shows how much he loves it.
Kenny Callander, OAM, great to have you on Behind the Barriers for the Australian Turf Club members. We're at Canterbury Park. You spent so much time here.
Love the track, and Tim, if you go back to the war years, I call it the Second World War, which is 70 years ago now, there was tracks all over Sydney. There was a track at Rosebery, where Gardner's Road is. There was a track, Victoria Park, which is the expressway, just where all those units are at Zetland, South Dowling Street. Even before that, there was a course at Mascot Airport called Ascot, and at Cogra there was a course, Moorfields. It's where the highway meets Rocky Point Road, just about behind the high school there. There was a racetrack, and Rosebery. I can remember going to barrier trials at Rosebery in about 1962. They'd closed it as a racecourse, but it was still used for training, and it was used for barrier trials. Then we got down to what we've got now: Randwick, Rosehill, Canterbury and Warwick Farm. Great tracks.
They're rippers, aren't they? And some great races here.
Mate, used to be more Saturday meetings in Canterbury. I can remember coming into Canterbury by train, which was my regular way to get here. You'd pull up at the station. From over there, you'd walk from the station. You'd come into the course at about the 1,200 metres now, and you'd walk across the track twice. Once when you first come in, and then again in the home straight to get to the turnstiles to either go into Ledger, which in those days was probably 5 bob, 50 cents, or the paddock, which was $2 a quid, yeah. And you had your choice, and there was always plenty of midweek meetings here, but the Canterbury Guineas used to be one of my favourite races, and I've seen some. Octagonal won the Canterbury Guineas at Canterbury, was one of the last ones.
Yeah, with Darren Beedman on board. What about Royal Randwick? What was Randwick like when you used to come in on the train?
Well, I'd get the train to Central, and then the tram. You'd get the tram at Chalmers Street. It'd go up to Cleveland Street, turn left, and there was special tram area at Randwick, which is now, ironically, where the Eastern Suburbs Tramway depot is.
Everything old is new again.
You'd get off the tram, go straight into the races, and there was people and bookmakers umbrellas. There was just a scene of excitement. And from the moment I first stepped foot on Randwick, I absolutely loved it. Randwick, you know, Tim, goes back, there was the first meetings that were there were in the 1830s. Wow. But then it became a regular racetrack from 1860, and I think the government gave the land to the then Australian Jockey Club, or on a one peppercorn a year rental, in 1863. So the AJC was formed then, yeah.
Just an extraordinary place. I love it. And look, the moment that stands out for me was when Winks said farewell, because it was one of the great moments of sport that I've ever seen. What are a couple of those things that just stand out for you, Kenny, from Randwick?
I came post-Tulloch, so I can't quote Tulloch, but a couple of things that superimposes 4 big mile wins. I think his last Epsom win, the crowd went ballistic, and that is a day I remember vividly. There were still enough people coming in those days. I can remember a couple of big demonstrations when Glastonbury had run last 2 weeks earlier, then come out and won the Metropolitan. I thought they were going to jump the fence that year. And of course, I don't like to be an old man thinking back, Winks. I loved Winks. I think Winks is the best racehorse I've seen.
Yeah, and didn't it just pick people up from places where, you know, they're on their knees, like whether it be health or things. Good racehorses, great racehorses, take people to another place.
Mate, Winx is one of those horses that everyone knew. If you walked up the road and you just said to a kid in a school uniform, hey, who's Winx? They'd say a racehorse. And look, I'm not saying everyone, but I reckon 8 out of 10 people that didn't go to the races, go and talk to the public servants and say, do you know who Winx is? They'd all know. And of course, if you went into any pub anywhere in Australia, everyone knew who Winx was.
They almost know exactly where they were when she won certain races. What about Rose Hill, Warwick Farm, My Hood, you know, Ugg boots, flannelettes? It's like it's a different version.
The boy from Guildford.
Yes, exactly. The different, like Rose Hill with so many great slipper winners and Warwick Farm. How do you reflect on those two tracks, and what are some of your great memories?
Well, Warwick Farm was almost thought of as a rural racetrack, perhaps like Hawkesbury, because Liverpool was just developing when I first come to the races. A lot of people won't know that Warwick Farm was also used for motor racing from 1960 to about 1973.
Wow.
And they'd take the rails down, and there was, I think, 3.6 kilometre track around the middle of it'd go way out at Warwick Farm. I saw Sterling Moss drive at Warwick Farm. I only went there once.
That's some trivia.
I found it boring.
Well, you love the horses. Well, Rose Hill, what a place. It's got another, look, we talk about the aura of Randwick. Rose Hill has that too, in its own way.
Yeah. Well, since we've got the championships going and all, for many years, I think the slipper was Sydney's premier race. And I used to love going to the Golden Slipper. I can remember when I was a copy boy at the old Daily Mirror, and I worked Saturdays, and it was a roster, I think about and my roster was coming on. I was going to have to miss the Golden Slipper. You couldn't miss the Golden Slipper, and this horse was coming from South Australia, Pago. But the gods were on my side, Tim. It poured rain, the slipper was postponed, it was on the next Wednesday, and I was able to go. So there was a Wednesday slipper at Rose Hill in 1963.
So Kenny, Rose Hill, it's got its own aura about it, and the Golden Slipper, obviously. Is there one that stands out for you?
Probably two slippers really stand out for me. Baguette was one of the people's favourites, trained by Phil Alotta. George Moore rode him, and he won the Golden Slipper and beat a horse called Royal Show K. Lengby. Royal Show protested, trained by Tommy Smith, should have got the protest. He didn't, and Baguette held the race, and he won the Triple Crown, the Sires and the Champagne as well. The other has to be in 2000, Tim. Belle de Jour missed the start. Now I know if you're going to miss the start, the jockey's got a bit of patience. It's not always the end of the world, but it is in a Golden Slipper. It's only 1,200 metres. El Beasley didn't panic, threaded his way through the field, and Belle de Jour got the cash.
Kenny, I could talk to you all day, but how about we finish with that? We'll go back 20 years and let's have a look at Belle de Jour.
Good on you, Tim. Thank you.
And there's the red light. The start is imminent in the year 2000. Amy, Golden Slipper. Starter on the stand, presses the button, they're off, and Belle de Jour bungled the start. The rider almost went over ahead, and French Braids and King of Danes bounced out in front, going up very, very quickly. Phoenix Park with Great Crusader misunderstood. Assertive Lad is caught out very, very wide as they settle fully into stride at the 250, and King of Danes the leader. Great Crusader is tackling it strongly, a length Assertive Lad and Phoenix Park, and then French Braids Continuum, and down the outside Crown Glory. Here she comes. Crown Glory is out after Assertive Lad, who hit the front, and Belle de Jour right through the middle. Freakish win. Belle de Jour almost fell at the start, gets the Golden Slipper.